Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, Shell Charity, a space covering all things STEM, careers and lifestyle. My name is Michelle and I'm a graduate engineer. So if you don't know, quick background, studied a bachelor's degree in engineering, master's degree in engineering, and I'm currently working as an engineer. If you've been keeping up with my previous videos, this is all part of a series which I've created all around application season. So my first video was about how to prepare for application season. My second video was giving you some top tips as to how to ace your online application, which is usually the first stage of a graduate application. And this video is going to be surrounding the actual interview skills that you need to have. The focus for today's video is going to be around competencies and scenario-based questions. I get a lot of questions from students who struggle with this area, mostly because maybe they haven't been reading the right materials, or maybe because they don't actually know how these kinds of interviews actually work and what the assessor or the employer is looking for. So without further ado, let's get going. Scenario-based interviews are used to assess your competencies, and your competencies is basically your behaviours, your personality, how you would react in certain situations, hence the term scenario-based. So this is a way for the recruiter or the company to find out whether you are the best fit for the role and whether you would actually succeed in the role. So it's less about the technical skills that you possess, but more about how you would approach different kinds of situations. In my honest opinion, scenario-based interviews are probably the easiest stage of the interview process. Most STEM roles require for you to do competency/scenario-based interview, and on top of that, a technical skills-based interview. And just from my experience, the technical skills-based interview is like up here, and competencies and scenarios are like, down here. And the reason being is that you are able to prepare beforehand for the questions that you're going to receive, and also the questions are very, very similar across all companies. This leads directly into my first tip, which is pre-rehearse your answers. One exercise that I like to do when I'm preparing for a one-to-one scenario-based interview is I like to go on Google, I type in the search bar, top competency-based interviews or top scenario-based interviews, and then what you'd probably get is this long list of questions that employers are most likely going to ask you. I would copy and paste that list, pop it into a Word document, and then I would start answering them one by one. And just by me looking at the question beforehand and having a think about all the scenarios or events in my life that I've been through and how they would apply to that question, I'm able to sort of start making those links in my mind and start practicing how I'm actually going to be able to answer that question in an interview. So once I have this 2-page document of my answers, I start rehearsing. I make sure that right before the interview, I know exactly how I'm going to answer that question. And if I don't know the exact words, I know the scenarios of my life that I am going to pick out from and how they would link to that question. So for example, if an interviewer asked me, describe a time where you portrayed leadership skills, I know for a fact that I am going to pull from my experiences from, my Duke of Edinburgh, or being the captain of a netball team. The more you do these kinds of questions, the more you practice them, you end up having a go-to set of scenarios that you can always pull from. And a little top tip, you are able to use the same scenario twice. A lot of people assume that you need to have 10 different scenarios crammed into your head, when the reality is that if you've got one good example, you can pull out a whole lot of competencies from them, and that saves you time because you're not having to remember all these different scenarios across your life. All you know is, I'm going to focus on this area, and from this area I can talk about 5 different types of questions. In terms of your answers, I highly recommend that you pull from all areas of your life. You are not restricted to just your education, your degree, or maybe a relatable work experience to the role that you're applying for. If you're someone who has had no work experience in the field of the job that you're you're applying for, then maybe talk about a part-time job, talk about a sports club, talk about a society you're part of. Even if you're someone that, you know, hasn't participated in any of those, you can talk about a family event that you maybe organised. You can talk about maybe that five-a-side kickabout that you organised with your friends. You know, I always tell people, do not be intimidated if you feel like you haven't done a lot in your life and you don't have all of these different scenarios to pick from. Even you waking up, preparing yourself and getting yourself to uni, you know, that I can personally pull from that. Organisation, because obviously you have to pack your bag, pack your lunch, get to uni. Timekeeping skills, because you have to get to lectures on time. What interviewers want to see is that you are able to build those connections from your life and from the behaviours that they are looking for, and you are able to communicate them in a coherent and concise way. When it comes to rehearsing your answers, please use the STAR method, especially if you are someone like me who tends to go off on a tangent and just babble their way when it comes to answering questions. Situation, task, action, result. Situation. Describe the situation, set the scene. Task. Tell the interviewer what it was that you were supposed to be doing. Action. Describe to the interviewer what it is that you did in that situation. And result. Describe to the interviewer what happened after you took that action, whether it was a positive result, a negative result, and what you got out of it. Using this technique will ensure that you stay on topic and that you don't start going off on a tangent. And even if you do go off on a tangent, sometimes just catch yourself and think, is what I'm saying related to any section of the STAR technique? And if you do find yourself straying, take a pause, possibly apologise to the interviewer, and then take it back to the STAR technique. If, like me, you've gone off on a tangent for the past 5 minutes to the point where you've even forgotten the question, again, pause and ask the interviewer to repeat the question. A lot of people are very shy to ask the interviewer questions because, you know, they're the interviewer, I'm the interviewee. However, they are there to help you, and most interviewers that I've come across are very supportive. You know, if you ask them, could you please repeat that question? Usually 10 times out of 10 they will repeat that question again for you, and it will really help ground you in terms of where is your answer going and whether or not you've actually, you know, been able to answer that question thoroughly enough where they are able to get the most out of it and really appreciate the skill that you are trying to describe. Another exercise that I participate in is actually listing out all the different scenarios or extracurricular activities that I've participated in, and then from there I'm able to link it to the sorts of questions that may come up during this competency-based interview. Now, you can either approach this from scenario to question or question to scenario. It just depends on how much experience you're pulling from. I was quite lucky in a sense of where I had done quite a lot of stuff in my life, so I was able to kind of list out the 5 top things that I've done, and then from that I was able to pull out key skills, communication, teamwork, timekeeping, and even my greatest weaknesses or situations of times where I've dealt with problems. However, again, if you're someone that hasn't got that much experience, then possibly go back and list out all the experiences that you can think of, and then through each experience list out the different competencies that you have hit in that experience, and then using the STAR technique you can start building your answer. Write it down and rehearse it like a script. I am not kidding you. You'll reach a point in this interview where, let's say if you're really nervous, you might go blank, but if you have that muscle memory of, oh okay, team leadership skills, oh last night I was rehearsing this one scenario of me doing XYZ, you will easily pull from that. Your brain will kind of switch on. Before you know it, you've done your STAR technique. Boom, next question. So the top questions that I've encountered, the top scenario-based questions are usually, tell me about a time where you've portrayed leadership skills, tell me about a time where you've dealt in a challenging situation or possibly dealt with challenging people, tell me about a time where you've been able to communicate effectively. I'm telling you, if you Google these questions, you will find lists and lists and lists and lists. And I kid you not, I still have my template on my laptop, and every like 1 or 2 years I like to update my scenarios so that I'm keeping things a bit more up to date. I'm not pulling from a scenario from when I was in year 10 or year 9. I'm actually going to pull from a scenario from 2nd year of uni, 3rd year of uni. One area that I feel like people don't really utilize a lot is actually your university experience or your experience in education. Like, education teaches us a lot of soft skills. For example, in your university modules, was there a module where you had group work? Because I'm pretty sure from that group work you can pull out teamwork and communication. Was there a module where you kind of really struggled to complete a piece of work? There you go, an example of a challenging time where you've had to overcome, you know, a barrier. Was there a period of time where you were trying to get hold of your lecturer and you couldn't get hold of them, and you had a deadline and you had to find a way to reach that deadline? Another example of overcoming a barrier. Education for me is the safest space, because the average person stays in education up until they're 18, which means that you have literally 18 years of experience to pull from. If you went to uni, you have that extra 3 to 4 years of experience, and if you didn't go to uni, or maybe you were working, you have that work experience. As I said earlier, competency-based interviews shouldn't be something that you should really be concerned about, especially if you've done the necessary preparations beforehand, and especially if, you know, the more interviews you do, the better you become at them. These scenarios literally become embedded in your mind. Me personally, I don't really prepare that much for competency-based interviews, and the only time that I do prepare for them is, for example, if I want to find out if a company kind of has a go-to set of questions that they use, and that will help me in terms of, oh, I haven't got to remember 30 questions, I know that this company is commonly going to use these 5 questions, so just using that as part of your prep. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for the next video, which will cover assessment centres.